Thank you. Can you hand me that clicker, George? I guess, am I capable of monitoring? Maybe I should go to the... Okay. Well, we've already talked about solar storms enough. I think the next step is actually the first step. The first step. When it comes to thinking about grid security, we really haven't taken the first step, which is to understand what the real threat is. I think people have heard enough today about the natural threat, but let's talk about the threat from man. We've also talked about nuclear EMP. This is familiar to everybody at this point. Radio frequency weapons, which really exist, and in fact, you can even buy them. You know, you don't need a license to buy them. This is from an advertisement. It's not intended to be used as a weapon. It's called the EMP suitcase. And it's intended to be used as a diagnostic device in industry. In fact, I think Emeritus has actually purchased one, shown it around. You know, anybody who has the money to buy this basically can buy a weapon of mass destruction. The bad guys know about nuclear EMP, radio frequency weapons, physical sabotage, cyber attacks. And if you take away nothing else from my briefing, it is the first step, or the next step that we must take, is to understand the first step, which is the threat is from all of these things. Right now, the way we think about, take our cybersecurity doctrine, when we think of cyber warfare, it's defined narrowly as computer viruses and hacking. And most cybersecurity experts don't talk to the guys who know about nuclear EMP. And the nuclear EMP guys tend not to talk to the radio frequency weapons people. And none of them talk to people who are into the Green Beret, sabotage, commando, physical, kinetic type sabotage attacks. The bad guys plan to use all of these together, all of them in conjunction. So we've got to stop arguing with each other about which of these threats is the highest priority. They're all the highest priority because we face all of these threats simultaneously. North Korea has actually practiced the nuclear EMP attack against us. And in fact, it's practiced what I call a blackout war. They have different names for it. They've written about it in their military doctrine. The Russians, the Chinese, Slipchenko's no contact wars, Shenwei Guang's total information warfare. The Iranians have written a book called Passive Defense, which ironically is about the offensive use of all of these elements in combination. Physical sabotage, cyber attack, non-nuclear EMP weapons, a nuclear EMP attack against the United States specifically mentioned in a military textbook, you know, as their version of cyber warfare. That's their version of cyber warfare. They're all patterned after Slipchenko's no contact wars, you know, which describes all of these in combination. In fact, the first page of the Iranian military textbook pays tribute to Slipchenko. He's their guru. He basically taught them, you know, how to think about this future revolution in military affairs that involves attacking electric grids and other critical infrastructures by all these means. This is the track of North Korea's KSM-3 satellite that was orbited over us in the midst of the worst ever North Korea. You won't have read about this in the newspapers unless you've read some articles written by me and Ambassador Cooper, you know. But in the midst of the worst ever nuclear crisis we ever had with North Korea, and that was taken of Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea, in his command post in the midst of this crisis. It was the aftermath of their third illegal nuclear test in February of 2013. And the United States was going to impose additional international sanctions to punish them. And they started making nuclear missiles, to threaten to make a missile strike, a nuclear missile strike against the United States and our allies. The map on the back wall shows, you know, trajectories where they would make this attack, and Kim Jong-un is there with his general staff. The Obama administration took this threat so seriously that we were flying B-2 bombers across the demilitarized zone doing our own exercises to deter him. But he was not so deterred that he did not orbit a satellite. And this was the satellite, the KSM-3, that in the midst of that worst ever nuclear crisis did what Ambassador Woolsey described earlier. It was launched to the south like a fractional orbital bombardment system so it could evade our ballistic missile early warning radars and interceptors, which are all oriented to the north. We're blind and defenseless to the south. Orbited over the South Pole, it came up from the south. On the 10th of April, it passed over at the optimum altitude and trajectory to put one of those hemp fields, an EMP field, over all 48 contiguous United States. On the 16th of April, it was in the optimum trajectory to put a peak EMP field over the Washington, D.C., New York City corridor, which would collapse the eastern grid. You know, the United States can't survive without the eastern grid. You know, that's 75% of our electrical generating capacity there. So even that attack, is an existential threat to us. On this very day, the 16th of April, that's when the mysterious attack by the U.S. Navy SEALs, called it a commando-type operation, against the Metcalf Transformer substation in California on the very day that the KSM-3 was passing over the Washington, D.C., New York City corridor, posing a threat to the eastern grid. We had this event that was a threat to the western grid happen. And in the middle of all of this stuff, there were cyber attacks, as there are every day, thousands of them being made on our electric grid and other critical infrastructures. So you may have had all the elements, or most of the elements, of a blackout war, or a no-contact war, or what the U.S. Army War College, some of them call it Cybergeddon, which is a combined arms operation using all of these elements, and practiced back in 2013 by the North Koreans. A couple of months after that, you know, one of the nightmare scenarios the EMP Commission had, you know, was the idea that an adversary could launch a short-range ballistic missile using a nuclear weapon, maybe from the Gulf of Mexico, to put it over the grid someplace and do an EMP attack that way. It keeps their fingerprints off the attack. You can do it anonymously because you can, use a missile like a Scud and use a freighter that could be owned by anybody. It could be done by terrorists. And indeed, it looks like the North Koreans practiced that too, you know, because in July, the crisis, you know, supposedly was over by that time, but a couple of months after the height of the crisis, you know, we intercepted a North Korean freighter trying to go through the Panama Canal, and hidden under thousands of bags of sugar were two SA-2 nuclear-capable missiles hidden under these bags of sugar on their launchers, And they didn't have nuclear warheads on them, but they are designed to carry a 10-kiloton nuclear weapon. And they had transited the Gulf of Mexico already. They were going back to North Korea, having come in from the Atlantic side. It was almost as if they were trying to see, well, we've gotten away with this so far. We've gotten this freighter with nuclear-capable missiles into the Gulf of Mexico, and could we possibly get back through the Panama Canal and the stupid Americans won't find us? Well, the only reason we did find them was because that particular freighter was notorious for providing small arms to terrorists and smuggling drugs. And the people who were inspecting it weren't looking for nuclear-capable missiles, they were looking for drugs, but found the SA-2s. And that's actually a picture of one of them that was found. The bad guys know about, we've been talking theoretically about threats to the grid, but these threats are actually happening already. In 2013, there's no clock, Chuck, so tell me when, okay? Okay. You know, in 2013, the Knights Templars, they're a Mexican drug cartel terrorist group. They blacked out a whole province in Mexico, put 500,000 people into the dark, using primitive weapons, you know, small arms and explosive pipe bombs, so that they could go into the towns and villages and drag village leaders who were opposed to the drug trade into the public square and execute them, cutting the people off from the federales. Now, if the Knights Templars, you know, these Neanderthals who figured out that the electric grid is a major societal vulnerability, what if ISIS and Al-Qaeda, Iran, North Korea, and Russia, what more sophisticated modes of attack may they have in mind for us? And while we were fixated on 2 minutes, okay, anyway, terrorists had actually blacked out. The first time terrorists had blacked out a whole nation was on the 9th of June. Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula blacked out 16 cities, 24 million people living in Yemen. Pakistan, earlier this year, in 25th of January, 80% of Pakistan was blacked out by a nuclear attack, attack on the grid, and Pakistan is a nuclear weapons state. Turkey's been blacked out, allegedly by an Iranian cyber attack, according to the reports. If so, it'll be the first time that an entire nation has been blacked out by a cyber attack. Where are we? I think we're like in 1936 to 1938, when basically the Nazis were experimenting with the Blitzkrieg, a new way of warfare, a revolution in military affairs, doing it in a small-scale way before they sprung this surprise on the Western democracies. I think that's where we are. And I think we need to understand We need to understand their way of war. And we've got to stop thinking in stovepipe ways about the security of the grid and the threats as being EMP, nuclear EMP, or non-nuclear EMP, or physical threats, or cyber threats. They are thinking of all of this as a combined arms operation, and they write about it. And, well, you probably can't read. All right. They write about it. I guess my last suggestion in terms of next steps then in this connection, there are so many other next steps, but the next step has got to be the first step for us to finally understand the threat, really, that's coming at us from the other side, how they think about this and how they plan about it. During the Cold War, you know, one of the great benefits, and I think one of the reasons we won the Cold War, is the Department of Defense and the intelligence community was smart enough to declassify Soviet military textbooks, things like Sidorenko's The Offensive and Sokolovsky's strategy, military strategy. There was a U.S. Air Force series that was published that had about 20 of the basic Soviet military textbooks that describe how they would fight a future war. And this was available to academics and people who are interested in international security matters and things like that. So we got a whole-of-nation solution to this, not just a handful of specialists working in DOD and the intelligence community, but we were able to harness other brain power in our society to how do we deter, how would we defeat this kind of a plan that's coming at us. We have no equivalent for that today in this modern war on terrorism, in this modern war of what we call cyber war, what I call a blackout war. We should, but the textbooks some of them are translated, but they're like for official use only, which is not officially classified, but it keeps it out of the hands of academics. It keeps it in the hands of business and industry. You know, you get it if you have a specific reason to have it. In effect, it does classify it. So one of the next steps, I would say, is to take the first step by declassifying the textbooks we have in hand now, make them unclassified, not just for official use only. So everybody can read these things and see that this is a real threat, you know, that they're actually practicing it. It isn't theoretical. They're writing about it. They're exercising it. They've actually done it to other nations. And this is their plan. It's spelled out for us. Let us all know about it so that we can apply what wit and wisdom we have to trying to protect our nation. So thank you for hearing me out. I know I've got a one step toward that. I just got a book called Blackout War. It's published on this that has some of what has been unclassified in this area and available to the public to read. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. Very, very good insights. I'll try to keep my remarks brief. Trying to capture some of the things I heard and my. Oh, you're going to have a question?
It's really a comment. I actually just went through the final report of the Turkish Blackout. It was not a hack, from everything we can tell. It was control system cyber. There's no question there. But the report did come out, you know, kind of their version of the final report of the Northeast outage. And there were a lot of issues with it, but it wasn't, and we were actually looking for it, expecting it to have been, but it wasn't.
Well, you don't know that. Can you hear me? Yeah, good. You know what? When I first heard in a newspaper account that it was a cyber attack, you know, I was extremely skeptical of that and reluctant to accept that report, because unlike a lot of people, I am one of those who is in the minority view that that the ability to collapse an electric grid just by means of cyber has been really overblown. That is much more difficult to do than people suppose. This goes against what our top experts are telling us. You know, the head of Cyber Command, you know, has testified to Congress that it is possible to black out the whole national electric grid for 18 months by means of cyber attack. So,
I believe that.
So I'm definitely in a minority view on this. I know that there was a Turkish report. I've seen that same report myself, but you know, Turkey is not the United States, sir. Do you think the Turks want to disclose to the Iranians that they really are vulnerable to a cyber attack, I think you still have to be skeptical about the assertions in that report that it was some other thing.
No, what I'm saying is when you look at the actual technical data, you look at...
How do you know you have the technical data? It comes from Turkey.
It comes from Turkey.
You don't know. You don't know.
Okay. I will leave it at that. The same
I
way...
I hope you're right, but I doubt it. Turkey's not the United States, and they don't even disclose information to their own people, let alone to foreign actors, especially politically sensitive information like that. Also, one other factor about the Turkish blackout is that it's interesting that the only province in Turkey that didn't go into blackout gets its electricity from Iran.
Okay. All right. Yeah, thanks. So I'm dividing my comments. We're talking about next steps and some of the themes that were developed today by the many outstanding presentations that we heard. I'll divide them into some technical observations and then some programmatic observations. From the technical side, we know that the protection can be done. I think this presentation we just heard from Jack Pressman is just outstanding. That we have a private company that has bitten the bullet and protected themselves against a variety of combined effects. And one of the big lessons there is they looked at all these effects together. They didn't stovepipe them. That's a major lesson there. So it can be done. The other theme I heard was complexity, that the systems are very complex, and that poses challenges, but this can be done. We can use divide and conquer approaches where we divide the systems up, but we also always need to make sure that we have protected end to end. So if you have two data centers talking to each other, you need to protect the data centers and the path in between them. The same goes with the electric grid. You have to do an end to end to overcome the complexity challenges. Modeling is very important, and that's something that in COSI, the system engineers excel at, but I would remind us all that it's very important to test. That was a message that came through from the INCOSI speakers we heard. You need to not just model, but test. And there are always in these EMP installations, and GMD and cyber installations, there are always unknown unknowns that you will never identify on paper. You have to do the tests. A couple of things that need to be tested that haven't been yet, just off the record, just something for your information. The effects of GMD on generators. There have been a couple of papers recently that imply that not only are transformers vulnerable, but generators may be vulnerable as well. And so that needs to be part of our test program. And then large transformers. We have never, to my knowledge, tested a large HV, two-story tall transformer to these effects, and we need to load in fully loaded condition to EMP, and that something needs to be done. So that from a technical perspective. Then from a programmatic perspective, we need to come to grips as a nation with these effects and these challenges. And I think this conference, and thanks Chuck for organizing that, we are making progress in terms of coming to grips, understanding the effects. We're hearing from all these different sectors and disciplines where people are getting it. They are understanding what we're up against here. The consequences are preventable. The engineering tools are available to protect, and there are huge cost benefits. When you think about the impact of the large portions of the grid going down, we're going to measure those in GNPs. You're talking about trillions of dollars. I mean, the insurance industry has done cost studies where the losses are in the trillions. Well, the protection costs are minuscule compared to the effect on the national economy and the effect on in the worst case, on the continued existence of this country. There's some initiatives that would aid in this endeavor. We need the efforts are amorphous. You can tell just as you see people talk. There's pockets of progress that we've heard about today, but they're all very amorphous. Things are being done in bits and pieces. We've got a space weather strategy that totally ignores EMP and RF weapons and cyber. It's just so piecemeal. We need to have some kind of designated national organization, national executive agency to bring coordinate these things. We need a national trifecta, tri-threat protection plan that includes a set of planning scenarios. And that needs to be coordinated not just at the federal level, but with state and local stakeholders. I think my recommendation would be to concentrate on try to do this, focusing on the national power grid. And we might also, there are also supporting infrastructures that would need to include in the communication, transportation, fuel supply area, but make sure that grid is on so that we can have the lights to see how to fix the others if you don't, without the, we've heard this several times, if you don't have electric power, and the Katrina, Hurricane Sandy, the first responders are just dead in the water. You have to have that electricity, and that's a real lesson from these huge catastrophes they have that don't match what we would have with a EMP or GMD scenario. I also just wanted to mention in passing, important, but we need to address, Congress actually will need to address problems inherent in the regulation of the electric grid as conceived in the Energy Policy Act of 2005. The technical solution to any problem is the wrong solution. You have to have the legal and the business end of it covered as well. And so we need to address some of these legal problems where the industry has become a self-licking ice cream cone. Okay? My apologies to industry members. The industry is regulating itself. It's the only industry where that's happening, and we've got to fix that. And it's going to have to go up to Congress and up to Congress to fix that. And my last comment is. The importance of the business end, so the technical solution by itself won't work. You have the legal and you have the business end into it. And I think one of the big things in our favor in this country is competition. And I think as these smart grids and these microgrids gain traction and they expand, and we have these 10-acre data centers that are self-powered and don't need the electric grid, that's going to get their attention. But we need to make use of the competition to get ourselves protected. The states that have protected their power grid and have protected data center, they're the states that will attract business. And so I think there's a huge value in competition. So that's my take on it. Thanks.